When I was 12, I told Noah Bell I was going to leave our town and never come back. We were lying on the roof of his parents' garage in the middle of July, our backs pressed to sun-warmed shingles, our bicycles abandoned in the grass below us. The whole neighborhood smelled like cut lawn and hot pavement. Somebody down the block was grilling burgers. A sprinkler clicked rhythmically across a yard to our left. Noah turned his head to look at me, one arm tucked behind it like he didn't have a single urgent thought in the world. "You say that every summer," he said. "I mean it this time. You meant it last time too." I frowned at the sky. "You're annoying. You like me." That had been true for as long as I could remember. He was my first best friend, my first partner in crime, my first phone call after a bad day, my first automatic thought whenever something funny happened and I needed somebody else to see it. We lived 2 houses apart on a quiet street in Pennsylvania where everyone knew everyone, where dogs roamed between porches like they owned the neighborhood, and where adults still used phrases like, "be home by dark," without irony. Noah had the kind of face people trusted immediately. Open, bright, easy to read most of the time. He climbed trees better than anyone else. He could talk his way out of trouble almost as fast as he could get us into it. He made friends with teachers, cashiers, old women at bus stops, and people's golden retrievers. He was the kind of person the world seemed eager to claim. I was quieter, more likely to think for too long before I spoke, more comfortable with books than with strangers. My mother used to tell people I was observant, which was a kinder way of saying I spent most of my childhood standing half a step back and noticing everything, especially Noah. At 13, we built a snow fort in his backyard and swore we'd still know each other when we were 80. At 14, we spent an entire week trying to teach ourselves how to skateboard in the church parking lot and came home looking like we'd lost a fight with concrete. At 15, we sat on the hood of his dad's truck behind the baseball field and watched a meteor shower while he told me he wanted to live somewhere big one day. Somewhere loud. Somewhere that stayed awake after midnight. "Like New York?" I asked. He grinned. "Exactly like New York." I looked over at him then, at his profile lit silver by moonlight, and felt something inside me shift in a way I didn't yet know how to name. By 16, I did know. Or at least I knew enough. Enough to understand why my heart sped up when he shoved my shoulder and smiled at me like I was the beginning of a good idea. Enough to understand why every girl who flirted with him annoyed me on principle. Enough to understand that when he talked about leaving one day, what scared me wasn't the city. It was the possibility that he would go somewhere I couldn't follow. I never told him. At 17, he left first. Not permanently. Not dramatically. His dad got transferred for work in the middle of senior year, and just like that, Noah was moving to Boston with 3 months of high school left and an expression on his face like he was trying very hard to make it seem less terrible than it was. We sat on his bedroom floor surrounded by half-packed boxes and said all the things people say when they're too young to understand how often life actually interrupts itself. "We'll visit. We'll call. It's not that far. Nothing's changing." He hugged me in his driveway on the morning they left, long enough for his mother to wipe her eyes and pretend it was because of the wind. "Don't become weird while I'm gone," he said against my shoulder. "You're the weird one." "True. Still. Try." I laughed, because if I didn't laugh I thought I might embarrass myself. Then he got in the car, leaned halfway out the back window and shouted, "You better answer my calls, Miles." And because I was 17 and already a little in love with him and too much of a coward to say anything that mattered, I just raised my hand and nodded like that would be enough. For a while we did call. We texted. We sent each other pictures of stupid things. We stayed up too late talking about college applications and bad professors and the terrifying fact that nobody seemed to know what they were doing. We visited exactly twice in the first year. Once when he came back at Christmas, once when I took a bus to Boston in the spring. Then life did what life does. Not in one cruel, obvious moment. More in a series of small neglects. A missed call here. A text answered 3 days late there. New friends, new routines, internships, classes, exhaustion, distance. The kind of unraveling that doesn't feel like a disaster while it's happening. Just a loosening. A little less. Then a little less than that. By 22, we hadn't spoken in almost a year. By 24, I had trained myself not to look for his name online. By 28, I lived in Brooklyn, worked as a features editor for a digital arts magazine, and had convinced most people in my life that I was settled. I had a one-bedroom apartment in Park Slope with books stacked in unstable towers and a plant that should have died 4 times by now but somehow hadn't. I took the subway everywhere. I bought coffee from the same corner place every morning and argued with my barista about whether oat milk was ruining society. I went on dates that were mostly fine and occasionally terrible. I told myself I liked my life exactly the way it was. Mostly that was even true. Then one rainy Thursday in October, I saw Noah Bell for the first time in 11 years. It happened at a gallery opening in Soho that I had absolutely not wanted to attend. My editor, Vivian, believed in networking with a kind of religious fervor. "You cannot write about the city if you never leave your apartment," she told me that afternoon, sliding an invitation across my desk. "Go. Be charming. Pretend to care about textured metal sculpture." "I do care," I said. She looked at me over the top of her glasses. "No, you care about going home, reheating leftover noodles, and pretending your inbox doesn't exist. That too. Go." So I went. The gallery was all white walls and expensive lighting and people dressed like they'd personally invented understatement. Rain tapped against the front windows. The room smelled faintly of wine and wet wool. Somebody was discussing artistic tension in a tone that suggested they wanted to be overheard. I was halfway through my first glass of red and pretending to study a piece made entirely of suspended glass circles when a laugh behind me hit my spine before my brain had time to process it. Not because it was loud, because I knew it. I turned, and there he was, across the room, near the far wall, one hand around a drink, the other moving as he talked to someone I couldn't see clearly. Taller than I remembered, broader through the shoulders, dark coat, charcoal sweater, hair a little longer on top than it used to be. Older, obviously, sharper around the jaw. Less boy, more man, but unmistakably Noah. For a second, the entire room seemed to go out of focus around him. It was absurd, the force of it. All at once I was 17 again and standing in a driveway I hadn't thought about in years. He laughed at something, tilted his head. Then his eyes moved across the room and landed on me. He stopped. Actually stopped. Mid-breath, mid-motion, mid-everything. The man next to him kept talking for another second before noticing Noah was no longer listening. Noah didn't seem aware of that. His expression had gone completely still in a way I recognized immediately from childhood. Surprise first, then disbelief, then the quick bright edge of feeling he never quite knew how to hide. "Miles?" he said. I could barely hear him over the noise in the room, but I knew my name on his mouth even from 30 feet away. I set my glass down before I dropped it. He was already moving toward me. I met him halfway, not because I'd planned to but because my body seemed to have made the decision without consulting me. For one awkward, charged second we just stared at each other. Then Noah laughed softly and said, "No way." Something in my chest tightened painfully. "Hi," I managed. "Hi," he repeated, like that was wildly insufficient and maybe a little offensive. "That's all I get?" I had a better speech prepared for the hypothetical event of running into my childhood best friend at a pretentious gallery in Manhattan. His grin flashed exactly like it used to. There he is. That should not have affected me as much as it did. He looked at me like he couldn't quite believe I was real, like he was taking inventory. Hair, face, coat, expression, all of it. "You live here," he said, and it wasn't really a question. "Brooklyn." His eyebrows lifted. "You actually did it." "What?" "Left and never came back." I stared at him for a second, then laughed before I could stop myself. "You remember that?" "Miles," he said, with the deep mock patience of somebody addressing a child. "You announced it every summer." Warmth rushed unexpectedly through me. "You're impossible. And you're in New York. So are you." That seemed to surprise him. "Right? Yeah. I moved here in August." There was so much I could have asked. "Why? From where? With whom? For how long? Are you happy? Are you still the person I knew? Did you ever think about me the way I thought about you?" Instead I said the dumbest possible thing. August of this year? His smile widened. No, August of 1997. Yes, this year. I huffed a laugh. Sorry. You're just here. He studied my face for one long second and something in his expression softened. Yeah, he said quietly. I guess I am. The man from before approached then, saving me from whatever dangerous thing that moment might have turned into. Noah, he said, touching Noah's elbow lightly. Your friend from Parsons wants to know if we're still. He stopped when Noah looked between us. Oh, the man said, not unkindly. I'm interrupting. No, you're not, I said immediately. You definitely are, Noah said at the same time. The guy smiled. I'm Luca, coworker, not boyfriend, before either of you has to do emotional math in public. I nearly choked on air. Noah's face changed in a way I couldn't decipher fast enough. Luca looked delighted. I'm going to save you both, he said. Miles, right? Nice to meet you. Noah's been impossible to work with all week, so if you're here to humble him, God bless. Then he vanished back into the crowd like a chaos-loving spirit. I stared after him. Noah rubbed the back of his neck. He's a lot, he said. He seems fun. He is. Unfortunately, I looked back at him. So you're working here? Not here, no. I'm with an architecture firm in Tribeca. We did some design work for this space. I got dragged. Same. He smiled. Some things survive distance, apparently. It was such a small sentence, and somehow it landed in me harder than it should have. We drifted toward a quieter corner near the back wall, where a large abstract painting gave us partial cover from the room. The conversation should have been awkward. We had a decade of silence between us, enough missed years to drown in. And yet, within minutes, it felt unnervingly easy. He asked about my job. I asked about his. He told me he'd lived in Boston, then Chicago, then briefly DC before landing in New York. I told him about Brooklyn rent and my editor's pathological need for me to attend social events. He laughed at all the right places. I still knew when he was about to say something sarcastic before he said it. He still tipped his head when he was listening closely. It should have felt stranger. Instead, it felt familiar in a way that was more dangerous than strange would have been. At some point, he looked down at the half-finished wine in my hand and said, "Do you want to get out of here?" I looked up too fast. He raised both hands slightly. "Not like that, unless that sounded like that. I just meant there's a decent coffee place 2 blocks over, and I can't listen to one more person say the phrase spatial conflict." A smile betrayed me. "You hate this as much as I do." Deeply. I should have said no. I had work in the morning. It was raining. We had already done enough emotional damage for one night. Instead I said, "Coffee sounds good." Outside, New York was washed clean and shining. Rain had slowed to a mist. Cabs hissed through wet streets. The sidewalks reflected neon and headlights in blurred ribbons of yellow and red. People passed us under black umbrellas, collars turned up against the cold. Somewhere down the block a siren rose and faded. The city felt huge and intimate at the same time, like it always did on nights when the weather convinced everyone to move a little closer to themselves. We walked side by side, not touching, but close enough that I was suddenly too aware of exactly how much space separated us. The coffee place was narrow and warm, the windows fogged from the heat inside. We found a small table in the back. Noah took his coat off and slung it over the chair behind him. I tried not to notice how broad he looked in dark knit sleeves. Failed immediately. He wrapped both hands around his cup and looked at me over it with a half smile. "This is weird," he said. "Because we ran into each other after 11 years? That part, yes. Also because it doesn't feel like 11 years. It was exactly what I'd been thinking, which made my heartbeat annoyingly uncooperative. "No," I said. "It doesn't." He glanced down, then back up. "I used to think about calling you all the time." Honesty, from Noah, had always come without much warning. I went still. "What stopped you?" His mouth twitched without humor. "Pride, probably. Time. The increasingly embarrassing fact that the longer it had been, the weirder it felt to call." I looked at the table. "Yeah." His gaze sharpened. You too. I laughed softly. Noah, I ignored your profile the one time Instagram suggested you to me because I didn't know whether following you after 9 years would make me look nostalgic or unstable. That got a real laugh out of him, low and warm and familiar enough to hurt. Okay, he said. Good. That's upsettingly comforting. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, just full. Then he said quieter, I missed you. No one had ever said those words to me in quite that voice. Not dramatic, not reckless, just true. I looked up. Something shifted between us then. Not visibly, maybe. No one across the room would have noticed. But I felt it all the same. A tiny recalibration. The sense that we were no longer standing safely inside nostalgia, but somewhere closer to the edge of whatever this was becoming. I missed you too, I said. He held my gaze for a moment too long, then nodded. Once, like he'd been bracing for something and had finally exhaled. We stayed there for nearly 2 hours. Long enough for the barista to wipe down the front counter twice and for the rain to stop entirely. When we finally stepped back out onto the street, the city had settled into that late-night hum New York wore so well. Less frantic, more electric, like it had decided to show us its softer face. My subway's this way, I said, pointing downtown. He looked annoyed by that. Mine too. Convenient. Fate, he said solemnly. I laughed before I could stop myself. We walked to the station together. On the platform, under flickering fluorescent lights and an ad for a law firm nobody had ever liked, I became suddenly aware that the evening had to end. Noah shoved his hands into his coat pockets. So, he looked at me for a beat. Can I see you again? The question should not have made my pulse jump the way it did. It was a normal question, a friendly question, an old friend in a city of millions asking not to disappear again. And yet, yeah, I said. His smile came slowly. Yeah, good. The train thundered into the station then, all noise and wind and bright windows. We stepped closer to the yellow line automatically, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. He glanced at the train, then back at me. Dinner next week? Sure. You sound calm about this. I am calm. You're not. I know your face. That almost undid me. The doors opened. I stepped inside and turned back before they closed. Noah was still standing on the platform, one hand lifted, watching me with an expression I couldn't read clearly through the glass. Then the train pulled away, and he was gone. For the next 6 days, my life became profoundly annoying, because suddenly New York was full of reminders. A boy on a skateboard in Prospect Park, and I'd remember Noah at 14, knees bloodied, declaring gravity a personal enemy. A Mets cap on a subway bench, and I'd remember us sneaking sodas into a summer game because he said ballpark prices were unethical. A rooftop party in Bushwick, and I'd remember being 15, listening to him talk about city lights like they were a prophecy. By Tuesday, I was checking my phone too often. By Wednesday, I had read and reread his text confirming dinner at least 7 times. Thursday, 7:30, Lower East Side. Trust me, Noah. It was the trust me that got me. Noah had always believed in specifics. If he told you to trust him, it meant he had a plan. Thursday night arrived cold and clear. The city had that brittle late-fall brightness to it, the kind that made every storefront glow harder after dark. I showed up outside a narrow restaurant on Orchard Street 3 minutes early and still found him already there. He was leaning against the brick wall beside the entrance, scarf loose at his throat, checking his phone. When he looked up and saw me, his whole face changed. Not dramatically, just enough. A small shift into something warmer, more personal. Like he had one expression for the rest of the city and another for me. You're early, he said. You're earlier. I'm trying to make a good impression. After 11 years? Bold strategy. He grinned. Is it working? I should have said no. Instead I said, maybe. Dinner was easy in exactly the way that felt least safe. We talked about everything we'd missed. Not every detail. That would have taken weeks. But the shape of things. His mother's move to Vermont after his parents' divorce. My father's retirement and his newfound obsession with sourdough. The women I'd dated briefly in college before admitting to myself that I was mostly trying on a version of life that didn't fit. The man Noah almost moved in with in Chicago and why he hadn't. That part caught my attention. You dated men? I asked, trying and failing to sound casual. His eyebrows lifted. You sound surprised. No, you just never knew. I looked down. I guess not. A softness crossed his face. There's a lot we don't know anymore. You should have felt sad. Instead, it felt like an opening. I told him about coming out at 20 in the least glamorous possible setting. A bad apartment in Philadelphia with 2 roommates and a broken refrigerator that buzzed through the whole conversation. He laughed so hard he nearly knocked over his water glass. You got that look, I said. What look? The one that says you're about to be unbearable. Only because I can't believe you told me your major life revelation happened next to expired yogurt. That's your takeaway? It's a strong visual. I shook my head, smiling despite myself. He leaned back in his chair and studied me for a second. You know what's weird? What? I always thought if we saw each other again, there'd be this giant awkward hole where all the missing time was. And there isn't. His voice was quieter now. There's just you. That left me without anything clever to say. After dinner, he insisted we walk, because according to him, no night in New York should end indoors if the weather was decent. We ended up heading west with no clear destination, just following streets until they opened into wider ones, until the city gave us Washington Square, then the Village, then the soft pull of downtown. At some point, our conversation thinned into companionable silence. Not empty, just settled. We passed a bookstore still open late. A man playing saxophone near a subway entrance. A couple arguing affectionately over pizza toppings outside a corner shop. Can I ask you something? Noah said. You usually do. He glanced at me. Why'd we really stop talking? The honesty of the question made me slow half a step. I don't know. He waited. I exhaled. That's not true. No, he said gently. It's not. I shoved my hands deeper into my coat pockets. I think, after a while it felt like you had this whole other life. And every time we did talk, I became too aware of the fact that I wasn't in it. He was quiet beside me. I didn't know where I fit anymore, I said. So eventually I stopped trying to figure it out. Noah took that in without interrupting. Then, after a moment, he said, I thought you were the one pulling away. I laughed once without humor. That's depressing. A little. We stopped at a crosswalk. Across the street, traffic rolled past in glittering lines. A food cart hissed on the corner. Somewhere above us, an apartment window was open and somebody was playing music too loudly for November. When I left, Noah said, looking straight ahead, I think I expected us to stay the same. That was optimistic. I know. He smiled faintly. But you were you. I figured you'd always be there. I turned to look at him. His expression had gone careful, unarmored in a way that made my chest tighten. When you weren't, he said, I got weird about it. The light changed. Neither of us moved right away. I didn't know how to say that I was hurt without sounding like I had a right to be, he continued, because I was the one who left. My throat felt suddenly too tight. Noah, I'm not saying this to make you feel bad. I think I let too much time pass because admitting I missed you felt bigger than I knew how to handle. There it was again. Missed you. Only this time it carried years. We crossed the street in silence. On the other side, he slowed near the small iron fence of a pocket park and turned to face me fully. The city kept moving around us. Cabs splashed through a puddle. 2 women in long coats laughed as they passed. The saxophone from blocks away drifted faintly on the cold air. Noah looked at me like none of it existed. There's something else, he said. Every nerve in my body seemed to wake up at once. What? He opened his mouth, then stopped. Ran a hand through his hair. Laughed under his breath like he couldn't believe himself. This is going to sound insane. Probably. He smiled despite himself. Then the smile faded. When I was 17, he said slowly. Right before we moved, I almost told you something. The entire world seemed to narrow. I stared at him, He looked down for 1 second, then back up. And then I didn't, because I thought if I said it out loud, it would wreck whatever we still had time left to be. I couldn't feel my hands. Noah. His name sounded different in my own mouth. Smaller, stripped down. I had the biggest crush on you, he said, and laughed once, breathless and disbelieving. For years, actually. God. Saying that at 28 feels humiliating. Every thought I had disappeared. He watched my face with gathering uncertainty. Miles? I should have answered immediately. I should have said anything at all. Instead, I stood there looking at him. At this man I had loved in quiet, unfinished ways since I was 15. Standing under a streetlight in Manhattan and telling me the one thing I had never let myself imagine hearing. Miles, he said again, softer now. Please say something. I let out a laugh that felt dangerously close to breaking. You had a crush on me? His eyebrows rose in disbelief. That's your first question? It's not a question, I said. It's more like my nervous system trying to reboot. That got a startled laugh out of him, but his face was still tense, searching mine. I took one step closer without meaning to. Noah, I said. I was in love with you. He went completely still. Not had been. Was. The truth came out before I could reshape it into something safer. His eyes held mine. For years, I said more quietly. I didn't tell you because you were leaving, and because I didn't know if you liked guys, and because I was 17 and terrified and stupid. His expression changed so fast it almost undid me. Shock first, then hope so naked it hurt to look at. You were. I laughed softly. Still stuck on the wording? You were in love with me. Yes. He took a breath like he'd forgotten how. For one suspended second neither of us moved. Then Noah said, voice rougher than before. Tell me to mind my business if this is a terrible idea. That should have warned me. Instead it made me step even closer. It depends, I said, and my own voice was not as steady as I wanted it to be. On what? On whether this is the part where you kiss me. Something in his face opened all at once. Not surprise. Recognition. Like we had both finally arrived somewhere that had been waiting for us longer than either of us understood. He lifted one hand slowly, giving me every possible chance to stop him, and touched the side of my face. His palm was warm despite the cold. You have no idea, he said quietly, how long I've wanted to do that. Then he kissed me. It was gentle first. Not hesitant exactly, but careful in the way people are careful with things that matter too much. The first touch of his mouth against mine felt unreal in the most precise possible way. Not because it was dramatic, because it fit, because some deeply buried part of me recognized it instantly and with painful certainty. My hand came up to his coat without me thinking, fist curling lightly in the fabric. He made the smallest sound low in his throat, and then the kiss changed. Still soft, still unhurried, but deeper now, warmer. Years of almost in it. When we finally pulled apart, we didn't go far. His forehead rested lightly against mine. Our breath mingled white in the cold air. Somewhere down the block a car horn blared, absurd and distant. Noah laughed once under his breath. What? I whispered. I cannot believe, he said, that we lost 11 years because we were both idiots. A helpless smile broke across my face. That does sound like us. He looked at me then in a way I don't think anyone ever had before. Not nostalgic. Not uncertain. Not almost certain. And that, more than the kiss itself, was what nearly undid me. I don't want to lose you again, he said. The honesty in it landed low and deep. You won't, I said. He searched my face like he needed to be sure. Then, with the kind of tenderness that makes your chest ache, he kissed me again. The second kiss was slower, less surprise, more intention. My fingers slid from his coat to the back of his neck. His thumb moved lightly along my cheekbone. The city kept rushing around us, all traffic and voices and light, and somehow none of it mattered. When we finally separated this time, he stayed close enough that the line of his body still warmed mine in the cold. So, he said, voice a little unsteady for the first time all night. So, I echoed. I'm thinking, he said carefully, that because our first kiss happened next to a tiny park and a food cart, New York now owes us a better second date. I laughed. You're assuming there's a second date. His eyes warmed. You kissed me back, Miles. I feel comfortable assuming at least moderate interest. Moderate? Fine. Deeply alarming interest. That's better. His smile turned bright and helpless and so familiar it made my heart hurt in a new, better way. He walked me to my subway again, but this time we didn't stand half a foot apart pretending not to feel anything. His hand found mine somewhere between Houston and the station entrance, natural as breath. We laced our fingers together without discussing it, and the ease of that nearly sent me sideways. At the platform, he kept looking at me like he was still half expecting to wake up. You're smiling, I said. So are you. That's because I'm trying not to pass out. He laughed. Good. Glad we're both thriving. The train arrived too soon. When the doors opened, I turned reluctantly toward them, then turned back. Noah leaned in and kissed me once, quick and warm and entirely unconcerned with the fact that we were on a subway platform in public. Text me when you get home, he said. I blinked at him. That was smooth. I've had 11 years to prepare. I got on the train laughing, and somewhere between West 4th and Atlantic Avenue, with the reflection of my own stunned face in the darkened window, I realized that for the first time in a very long while, I had absolutely no idea what came next. Only that I wanted it. The next month was ridiculous, and wonderful, and occasionally terrifying. New York became ours in strange, specific pieces. A diner in the East Village where he insisted the pie was life-changing and I informed him he had the palate of an unsupervised 12-year-old. A bookstore in Cobble Hill where he followed me through 3 floors of fiction and architecture monographs, occasionally reading the worst possible back cover blurbs in a dramatic voice. A Sunday ferry to Governor's Island because he said the skyline looked better from a little distance, and then spent half an hour making fun of my gloves before warming my hands inside his coat pockets anyway. He was still Noah, still infuriatingly easy to talk to, still capable of making me laugh when I least wanted to, still the sort of person who tipped too much at coffee shops and remembered details people thought nobody noticed. But he was also older in all the ways that mattered. More thoughtful, more deliberate, better at sitting inside difficult feelings instead of running from them. I liked that version of him with a kind of gratitude that sometimes bordered on grief for all the years I hadn't gotten to know him. One night, walking back from a jazz bar in the West Village, I said as much. Do you ever think about it? I asked. About what? The years in between. He was quiet for a few steps. Yeah. Does it make you crazy? Sometimes. He glanced over at me. Mostly it makes me grateful we're here now. The simplicity of that should not have moved me the way it did. But then, Noah had always had a way of saying the thing that landed exactly where it needed to. By December, he had a toothbrush in my apartment and I had one at his place in the Lower East Side. By January, my friends had stopped pretending not to notice the way my entire face changed whenever his name lit up my phone. By February, the city had turned gray and icy and mean in the way New York sometimes does after too much winter, and I still found myself wanting him around with a kind of steady certainty that no longer surprised me. That should have been the uncomplicated part. It wasn't, because love stories, even the good ones, don't become simple just because the right people finally kiss each other. They become real, and real things come with timing, history, fear, and choices. The first crack came in March. Not a dramatic one, not a betrayal, just a truth arriving before either of us was ready. I found out by accident. He was in the shower at my apartment one Saturday morning, and his phone, left face up on the kitchen counter beside the coffee grinder, buzzed twice in quick succession. I wasn't trying to snoop. I need that stated for the record. I was reaching for my mug when the screen lit up. Luca, did you tell him about London yet? I went still. A second message appeared. Luca, because if not, I'm revoking your right to claim emotional maturity. The bathroom water kept running. Somewhere in the living room, my radiator knocked ominously like it resented the season. I set my mug down too carefully. When Noah came out 10 minutes later, hair damp, t-shirt half on, he took one look at my face and stopped. What happened? I folded my arms. He looked at the counter, saw his phone. His expression changed instantly. Miles. What's London? The silence that followed was not a good one. Noah closed his eyes briefly. I was going to tell you. Great sentence. Love that sentence. He winced. I know. I hated how tight my voice sounded when I said, How long have you known? He dragged a hand through his wet hair. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. It's not what you think. That depends on what I think. He met my eyes. My firm offered me a position there. 6-month placement. Maybe longer if it goes well. The apartment suddenly felt too small. And you weren't going to mention that? I was. I just didn't know how. His silence answered for him. I laughed once, humorless and sharp. That seems to be a theme with us. Noah, I said, cutting him off with a shake of my head. Do you want to go? He looked at me for a long second. That's not a yes or no question. Feels like one. He exhaled. Professionally? It's huge. It would mean a lot. There it was. Not a yes. Not a no. Just enough truth to make my stomach drop. I looked away. Miles. Don't, I said quietly. He went still. Don't what? Don't talk to me like I'm making this hard for you. His face changed. Hurt, then understanding. That's not what I'm doing. No? Because from where I'm standing, this feels a lot like being 17 again and finding out you're already halfway gone before I've had a chance to say anything useful. The second the words left my mouth, I knew I'd hit something too close to bone. Noah's expression shut down in the way I had only seen a few times in my life. Not cold, just wounded. That's not fair, he said. I knew that. I knew it even as anger kept me upright. Maybe not. He stared at me for another beat, then nodded once. You're right, he said quietly. I should have told you. The calmness of it made me feel worse, not better. I didn't say. No, you did. He picked up his phone from the counter and slid it into his pocket. And you're not wrong. He grabbed his coat from the chair. My pulse jumped. What are you doing? Giving you space before we say something stupid. We've already done that. A flicker of something crossed his face. Then maybe we stop here for the morning. He left before I could decide whether I wanted him to. The door shut behind him with a soft, final sound that somehow felt louder than shouting. The next 3 days were miserable. Not spectacularly. Worse. Quietly. He texted once that afternoon. I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner. I stared at it for 10 minutes before replying. Yeah. You should have. He didn't answer, which was fair. On Monday, Vivian asked me why I looked like a recently abandoned poet. On Tuesday, my barista gave me an extra shot of espresso for spiritual reasons. On Wednesday night, I found myself standing in my apartment, holding Noah's spare key in one hand and wanting to throw it at a wall for no mature reason whatsoever. Instead, I sat down on my couch and admitted the thing I had been trying not to say aloud. I wasn't angry because London existed. I was angry because I was terrified. Terrified that, after finally finding our way back to each other, the universe would reveal this entire thing had only been on loan. Terrified that Noah still had one foot turned toward elsewhere, and I'd been too happy to notice. Terrified that if he went, the old distance would come back with sharper teeth this time. That night, around 10, someone knocked on my door. I knew it was him before I opened it. Noah stood in the hallway in a dark coat, hands in his pockets, looking tired in the specific way people do when they've been arguing with themselves all day. Hi, he said. Hi. Neither of us moved. Finally he asked, Can I come in? I stepped aside. He crossed into the apartment slowly, glancing once toward the kitchen like maybe he still expected the argument to be waiting there. I stayed standing. He noticed. Okay, he said softly. That's fair. What do you want me to say? The truth would be nice. I laughed once. That's rich. He nodded. Yeah, I know. The room went quiet. Then, to my own surprise more than his, I said, I think I'm less mad than I am scared. Something in his face loosened. He took one step closer, careful. Scared of what? I looked at him. Really looked at him. The man I had found again. The man I had kissed in Manhattan. The man who had become part of my daily life so quickly it felt less like falling and more like remembering. Losing this, I said. Noah's whole expression changed. Oh, he said. And there was so much feeling packed into one syllable it nearly broke me. Miles. You didn't tell me for 2 weeks, I said. So forgive me if my first thought was that you were figuring out how to leave. He shook his head immediately. No, that wasn't it. He dragged a hand down his face. I didn't tell you because I was afraid if I said it out loud, I'd have to confront what I actually want. I went still. And what do you want? His eyes held mine. You, he said. No hesitation. No softening. Just the truth. I swallowed hard. That doesn't mean the offer doesn't matter, he continued, voice lower now. It does. I worked for it. I'd be lying if I said I didn't care. He exhaled. But I care about this more. Which is exactly why I got scared. The honesty in that left no room for easy anger. I leaned back against the edge of the table behind me, suddenly less certain of my own balance than before. He stepped closer. I'm not 17 anymore, Noah said. I'm not going to disappear and hope you understand what I meant after the fact. Good, I said, and my voice came out thinner than intended, because I'm getting a little tired of our communication style. That pulled a helpless laugh out of him. Fair. We stood there for a second, looking at each other like the room had narrowed. Then I asked the thing that still mattered. If you go, I said, what happens to us? His answer came without delay. We do the hard version. My chest tightened. Meaning if London happens, we figure it out like adults. Flights, time difference, bad planning, too many airport coffees, whatever it takes. He shook his head once. I am not losing you because geography thinks it gets a vote. Emotion hit so fast I had to look away. When I looked back, he was right in front of me. I should have told you sooner, he said quietly. I know that. But Miles, you don't have to guess where you stand with me. His hand lifted slowly, giving me every chance to refuse it, then settled warm at my jaw. You never did, he said. Not really. I was just too stupid to say it when it mattered. That did it. I let out one unsteady breath and leaned into his hand. Noah's expression softened instantly. Come here, he murmured. Then he kissed me. Not tentative this time. Not rushed either. Certain. The kind of kiss that says, yes, I'm here, yes, this is hard, yes, I still choose it. My hands found his coat. His mouth moved warm and familiar against mine. When he pulled back, only enough to speak, his forehead touched mine. I haven't accepted anything, he said. My eyes opened. You haven't? No. Luca made it sound. Luca thinks all emotional situations should be handled with the urgency of a kitchen fire. Despite everything, I laughed. Noah smiled against my mouth. I asked for time. For me. For us. His thumb moved lightly along my cheek. For myself too. I needed to know if wanting this was enough to change the plan. I stared at him. And is it? His smile was small and a little sad and completely real. I don't know yet. That should have devastated me. Instead, strangely, it didn't, because this time it wasn't silence. It wasn't distance. It wasn't him already halfway gone without telling me. It was the truth, standing right in front of me and trusting me enough to hear it. So I nodded. Okay, I said. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Okay. Yeah. I took a breath. I don't need a perfect answer tonight. I just need the real one. Something in his face went almost unbearably tender. That, he said softly, is one of the reasons I'm in love with you. The world stopped for half a second. I blinked. You just said that like it's a casual sentence. He laughed under his breath. It's not casual. I'm trying not to pass out. A smile broke over my face before I could stop it. Good, I said. Glad we're aligned. He kissed me again, slower this time, And by the time we pulled apart, the apartment felt warmer somehow. Less like a battlefield and more like a place we might survive. In the end, London didn't happen. Not because of me. Not only, anyway. A week later, Noah came over with Thai takeout and the look of a man who had just done something difficult and permanent. He set the food on my counter and said, "I turned it down." I stared at him. "You what?" He leaned back against the cabinets and blew out a breath. "I turned it down." "Why?" That earned me a look. "You know why, Noah." He was quiet for a second. "Because when I stripped all the prestige away," he said, "I realized I didn't want the life that came with it as much as I wanted the one I'm building here." Something in my chest gave way. "With me?" I asked, and hated how vulnerable the question sounded. "With you," he said. "In this city. In this version of my life." A small smile tugged at one corner of his mouth. Turns out teenage me was right about New York. He was just wrong about what I'd come here for. I moved before I could think too hard about it. Crossed the kitchen, caught the front of his sweater, kissed him hard enough to make him laugh against my mouth. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine, smiling. "That answer your question?" "Somewhat. Somewhat. Kiss me again and I'll let you know." He did. A year later, on the first warm night of spring, we stood on the rooftop of his building and watched the city glow itself into evening. Downtown shimmered in the distance. Water towers cut dark shapes against a violet sky. Somewhere below, a siren wailed and then vanished into traffic. Music drifted up from an apartment window on the next block. The air smelled faintly of rain and somebody's dinner. Noah leaned against the ledge beside me, one hand wrapped around mine. "You know," he said, "I still can't believe I found you at that gallery." I smiled. "You didn't find me. Vivian forced me there for career reasons. Then I owe Vivian my firstborn." "That feels excessive." He turned to look at me. "So does losing your best friend for 11 years and then accidentally getting him back in Soho." I laughed softly. Then he got that look on his face. The one I had known since childhood. The one that meant he was about to say something true without any warning. "What?" I asked. His thumb moved over my knuckles. "I think," he said slowly, "that some people are home in a way places never are." The city seemed to go quieter around us. "I used to think I was chasing New York," he continued. "And maybe I was. But when I ran into you that night, it felt less like the city gave me something new, and more like it handed back something I should have fought harder to keep." Emotion rose so fast in my throat I had to look away for a second. When I looked back, he was already watching me with that same careful, warm, certain expression that had once made my whole world tilt in the back seat of his parents' car, on a rooftop in Pennsylvania, in a coffee shop in Manhattan, under a streetlight in the village. Only now there was no uncertainty in it at all. "I loved you first in a town too small for either of us," he said quietly. "But I think I got to know you properly here." I laughed softly, because tears were dangerously close and I wasn't giving him the satisfaction yet. "That was annoyingly romantic." "I know. You practiced." "A little." I stepped closer until there was no real space left between us. "For the record," I said, "you were my first home too." The expression on his face then was worth every lost year that had brought us here. He kissed me under a New York sky just beginning to fill with stars. Slowly, warmly, like he had nowhere else to be. And because this city was loud and alive and incapable of minding its own business, somebody from a nearby rooftop wolf whistled. Noah broke the kiss laughing. "Very elegant," I said. "New York likes US. New York tolerates US." He smiled and kissed my forehead. "Same thing." Below us, the city kept moving. Trains under the river. Taxis through intersections. Strangers falling in and out of love under apartment windows. Millions of lives colliding and separating and beginning again. Funny thing about stories. When you're living them, you never know which moment is the one that changes everything. The driveway goodbye. The years of silence. The turn of a head across a crowded gallery. The first honest sentence. The first kiss. The decision to stay. Maybe it wasn't one moment at all. Maybe love was smaller than that. and bigger. Maybe it was every time two people had the chance to walk away and instead took one step closer. Noah squeezed my hand once, then brought it to his mouth and kissed my knuckles with absent, familiar affection. The skyline burned gold at its edges. The night opened around us. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to leave. I felt found. How did you like this story? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed it and want more emotional gay love stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And press the bell icon so you never miss a new story.